Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for the very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you this morning at IMARC. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the Gadigal and Eora people, the land where we stand today. And of course, I'd also like to pay tribute to those Aboriginal and Torres Island colleagues and partners whom we work with day in, day out across BHP's landscape, across our sites and offices in Australia. In the next 14 and a half minutes, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk to you about what is the next electrification revolution and how procurement is going to be playing a key role in this in the mining sector. As you all know, 7,000 years ago, people learnt how to smelt copper. And that was that first element of how we're going to move forward and prosper. Time moved forward and we saw the electrification revolution of the early 1900s, where copper wire became the underpinning element for progression, whether that was undersea cables, telegraphs, wire poles, or otherwise. Electrification took hold, and the 1900s became the first industrial revolution. And we all know that then took us through the 20th century and into the 21st century, and where we are now, where we stand today, at the cusp of what we believe is the next electrification revolution. And ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to talk to you about is how we at BHP are embracing this opportunity for the future to make it one that is memorable for the people who come after us. So I'd like to turn your attention to this chart. And the headline here is that copper demand is going to go from 30 million tons to 50 million tons in the space of about 20 to 25 years. 30 to 50 million tons, ladies and gentlemen. That is an increase of 1.7-fold. That is going to be driven by significant growth in urbanization, electrification, and what I would call conventional means of growth, GDP growth, as we've seen in the last many years. But much of that is also going to be driven by unconventional growth. This unconventional growth is driven by renewable energy demand. This renewable energy demand is very important as an element of that growth. Why is it important? It is important because the form it takes to drive copper demand will be key to understanding why we're seeing this 30 to 50 million ton increase. If I may turn your attention to the graph on the left-hand side, which shows electricity demand over various countries. In our base case, electricity demand doubles from 2030 to 2050, in our base case. What that graph shows you is the megawatt per hour per capita demand. And as you can see, that growth in India, China, Southeast Asia, and many other countries is set to burgeon. Now, where does that electrification demand come from? As I said a few moments ago, some of that comes from GDP growth, comes from urbanization, comes from conventional means. But a significant part of that will come from the renewable energy demand requirement. Now, what is that? What is that demand requirement? if I can turn your attention then to the right-hand side of the page, that shows the demand requirement, not just what we know as buildings, bridges, infrastructure, electrification, wires, telegraph poles, etc. We're now looking at renewable demand. What does that mean? That means wind power, solar panels, data centers. And data centers, as you know, are a critical requirement for the AI growth that we're seeing now. The key part of this, and if there's something that I really would like you to take away from this few minutes, is that the intensity requirement of copper for renewables is twice that of conventional copper demand. Twice the requirement. And so when we look at that increase, and on the right-hand side you see the blue and the yellow part of that bar graph is a 30% share of what I would call unconventional demand. This is the demand that comes from renewables. And that is only set to increase. That is our view today, but that is only set to increase over time. And as that increases, copper demand continues to rise. And as that copper demand continues to rise, we will see a significant demand for exploration, brownfield and greenfield excavation of mining across the world. And of course, BHP finds itself in a very, very strong privileged position as the largest producer of copper in the world. We're endowed with the largest copper mine in the world with Escondida. And here in Australia, we have the third largest copper province in the world, which is Copper South Australia. And as you know, we have very, very strong growth plans of going from something like 300,000 tons today in Copper South Australia to perhaps 500 to 600,000 tons of copper equivalent. Overall, we think we will be able to move to 2 to 2.5 million tons of copper, given Escondida, Copper South Australia, what we're doing in Argentina, and of course, perhaps Resolution. Now, if that is the case, if that is the consumption demand that we're looking at, and the opportunity that lies ahead of us, which is that organization in each mining company that has the most significant opportunity to take forward this cusp of us being at something that's very special? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the procurement function, and I'll explain why in a moment. This chart shows you the procurement landscape at BHP. I have the significant privilege and fortune of having been at BHP for 23 years, and today have the accountability for all of BHP's procurement requirements across the globe, both OPEX and CAPEX, that add up to about $25 billion. And it is from this vantage point that I want to make a few points with you. The first of those is that conventional procurement went from transactional ways of working to category management, to value chain management, to some levels of partnership. And that is best symbolized or talked about through the work that most mining companies have done through this intersection of safety, social value, and commercial outcome. And BHP is no different in that way. We have delivered significant renewable outcomes, up to 100% renewables in Chile. The Goida and Blythe outcomes of 100 megawatts in Copper South Australia. Our commitments to Toyota to electrify our light vehicle fleet here in Australia, and the list goes on. But that's not going to take us to the transformation that we require as an organization, as a mining industry, to take this copper revolution to where it needs to be. And lastly, if I may then talk to you about this slide. You all know that the automotive industry is seen as the shining example of how procurement should be done in its most strategic form. Toyota is a great example of vertical integration, partnerships, and how they drive better outcomes. The mining industry has never been seen in that top right-hand corner. But ladies and gentlemen, let me assert that that has to change, and BHP is determined that the mining industry, the resourcing industry, is about to take on this challenge and be the procurement leaders in every industry. Why? Because we have to move to partnership and ecosystem models. The premise around ecosystem models and partnerships is that we don't have all the answers. We're trying to solve existential problems for the world. And in doing so, we must partner with people, organizations, governments, and our indigenous partners around the world. So let me give you a couple of examples of how we're going to do that. I can tell you here today, ladies and gentlemen, that BHP is partnering for differentiated capability across the world, and we are partnering for a competitive advantage. In both of those cases, if I can give you a couple of examples, differentiated capability means that the capability and the constraints that we see from a geopolitical, labor, pipeline perspective in our traditional markets like Australia and Chile and others means that we have to look further afield. Global capability centers, perhaps the next innovation center will be in Southeast Asia. Perhaps the next new manufacturer will be in South America. Perhaps the next new battery manufacturer for us will be in China. We have to look further afield and make sure that we're partnering with the right people. You all know that the best battery manufacturing and blade technology is coming out of China. We're partnering with the likes of BYD, CATL, and XCMG to make sure that BHP is at the forefront of that technology. In the capital world, the pipeline for copper growth that I talked about is billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. Now, do you think if we carried on in the way that we have in procuring in a transactional or category management way, that we would be able to deliver the strategies that are required to be ahead of the pack to deliver that consumption? No. We have to do things differently. And one of those examples is catalog engineering. If you think about the Worleys, the Bechtels, and the Fleurs of the world, the vantage point that they sit on, where they procure for BHP, Rio, Ma'aden, and many of the other resourcing giants, we need to partner with them in a way that is much closer than we ever have before. We will bring in their capability, their engineering prowess, bring that into BHP and work with them to take on this challenge of the future. And the last point I will make here, ladies and gentlemen, is that BHP is ready to take on this challenge, taking on an ecosystem approach, taking on partners and friends across the world, nearshoring, offshoring, and onshoring to deliver what is required. And as I said, the differentiated capability that we're looking for is far afield and near afield. And BHP is taking on a differentiated approach like it has never before. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the electrification revolution of the 21st century. And BHP and the mining industry is ready to take it on. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll take your leave. Thank you for listening.